Yes, sir, Rita. I'm waking up. Wake up, America. Here we are. 10 o'clock in the morning. I guess, the birds got the worm and the worm got the bird at 6 o'clock, but I didn't see either one of those things happen. But 7 o'clock was the morning glory, and I am here ready to go to work. Ah. Is you ready? Is you ready?
I'm ready.
Let's go to work. Yes, sir, Rita. Welcome to this episode of Black Beat Podcast. Hi, my name is John Washington, and I'm the editor-in-chief of Flourishing Media. I'm here as the managing editor with my with my managing editor. I keep forgetting whenever she comes on the show because she comes on the show rarely. But with my managing editor, Fawn Aberson. Hey, Fawn, welcome today on this episode. I hear we got some really exciting guests today.
Yeah, John, today we welcome author Brad Ketch. He has a compelling new book out called The Flourishing Community. It's a story of hope for America's distressed places.
Wow. That's a big one. So bring him. So you ready to bring him? Do we need to discuss anything before we bring him on the show, or do you just want to bring him on the show?
I mean, yeah, I'd like to get right into it. But first, let's quick word from our supporters, because Black Beat has some great supporters, and let's hear from one.
Hey, listen here, y'all. This is the 20th anniversary of Flourishing Media, y'all, so you need to get behind this. So all those supporters out there, all those listeners, all those readers, all those viewers, y'all get on the horn and holler at us, y'all. FlourishingMedia.com. And, these podcasts are on all of our major podcast platforms. Go on and check us out. And, hey, don't forget to hit the donate button when you take a look at the website. Did I miss anything, Miss Aberson?
I don't think so. Just subscribe and like our channel, please.
Tired of high gas prices? Save money on your transportation costs with TriMet's reduced fare transit card. If you meet income requirements, you can get your first month free while you enjoy unlimited rides on buses and trains anywhere TriMet goes. That's 1 month free, a $28 value when you sign up today for TriMet's reduced fare card. We'll help you travel smarter and make your money go further no matter what the price is at the pump. Visit TriMet.org/save to learn more and apply today. That's TriMet.org/save. TriMet. How life moves.
So I'm excited about this Brad character that you just brought on deck, and I was reviewing that book, and there are some things that he said in that book that was really interesting. So you want to come on? Let's jump on into this.
Yeah. So obviously, every issue of Flossin Magazine, we have something called the book remarks section. So we thought this would make a great addition to that. Our issue is on technology, right? So we take a deep dive into technology. And even though your book isn't about technology, Brad, you've had a 25-year career in technology prior to getting involved in poverty and justice work, right?
So what was the bridge? Where was the bridge?
There was no bridge.
There was Brad.
There was a cliff.
Oh, is that
there
Brad?
Was a cliff.
That's Brad.
There was a cliff.
Oh, was it?
And then there was a climbing up the cliff on the other side.
Yeah. So talk to us, Brad, a little bit how about your background, how that got started, and how you made the divide into this kind of work.
Well, first of all, I'm just so delighted to join you all today. I'm just really excited about reaching out to your readers and viewers and listeners. Because there's so much exciting things happening in Portland, in the African-American community today.
Man, is that what you call the excitement? It seems like a whole lot of land shifting to me.
Oh, man. It's but my background to your question was I'm from here. I'm from Portland. I'm from the east side, a Centennial High School graduate, back when the east side of the county was basically white flight, middle class. All of the diversity in Portland was down here.
Yeah. No,
Right.
And because of the policies of the city, all of the diversity, the low-income folks, the struggling folks, worked their way out to the far east, out into the numbers. And I was gone for 20 years. We lived in Chicago and Birmingham and Cincinnati and all over the place, but while I pursued my tech career.
Right.
But in 2008, you might have read there was a little adjustment in the stock market.
You think?
Too big to fail.
Oh, yeah, I remember that time.
Yeah.
Oh, my
maybe
gosh.
Changed careers.
Hey, younger listeners, look it up.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Man.
between 8 and 10.
So my company tanked, and Lynn and I were wiped out personally. I mean, it was a traumatic thing, but we had always had a goal. We had always had a goal to get involved in poverty issues, to get involved in community development type issues as our second half, if you will, like after our sons were raised and out of the house. Well, all of a sudden, we were at that time, but we weren't coming to it from a position of power or financial success. All of a sudden, we had a fundamental decision to make. Are we going to go forward with that, or are we going to rebuild my career somewhere else?
Wow.
And we've never made major decisions based on money.
Man, that's
So
fascinating.
we decided we're going to go for it anyway. And
Well, for the money or the decision?
to go for a life change into this kind of work.
Gotcha.
And so instead of coming to it from a position of power and the power imbalance, we came to it from a position of identification. And you know what? I would not have it any other way in retrospect.
Wow.
You know, sometimes in reading this book, so great, powerful opening, right? Started with a knock on the door for you, right? But sometimes, Brad, what I'm fascinated by reading this whole book is I can see your technology brain in processing.
Totally.
You know what
Yes.
I mean? And I think that's what made it so such a great read.
Oh, thank you.
It almost read like a movie to me. I was like, is there a movie in there?
Hey, any script writers
So
in
was
this
it- so
audience?
was it- you
I'm
think
trying
he
to
was-
tell you.
You think he was early in the notion about how we're today looking at AI and all those things to improve, in association with community development and all that kind of
Well,
stuff? He would sound like he was before his time.
Yeah, that's a great question. And artificial intelligence, I would say more like, project management.
Well, okay, I'm going to challenge both of you. It's
Okay.
neither. Here's where the technology thing comes in. Is in the tech industry, we always think about systems, ecosystems. You don't just create a product and launch it and say good luck. It's got to fit. It's got to fit. It's got to work with Microsoft or Apple or whatever.
Yeah.
Anyway, that ecosystem thinking is what we brought to the distress of this community.
Wow.
Okay, so and here's the logic, it's real simple. If people in Rockwood are dying 10 to 15 years shorter lives than people in downtown Portland, just 5 miles down the road, 10 to 15 years shorter lifespan, what the hell would have to happen for that neighborhood to be that way? It's a systemic failure, and it's not just one system. It's all of them.
Oh, yeah.
Right? Okay, so if you've got a systemic failure everywhere, the solution has got to be at the systemic level.
Wow.
So let's back
Wow.
up a little bit,
Now,
though.
well, I don't know
'cause-
how much further back can you go back to that one, but you can go back if you
So
like.
we're,
'Cause that's true. Systemic failures. Okay, yeah, go for it. I mean, that opens up a whole nother different
I know.
conversation.
Doesn't it?
But, oh boy.
No, go ahead.
No, I mean, this whole systemic reality has always been a conclusion that, how do you can't just run into a situation on the 30th floor and assume that's where the building began, because there's 30 floors underneath the 30th floor that you entered in. But we tend to want to build the rest of the building based on our perception of that 30th floor. And that's the biggest mistake that we make, because we don't assume that the rest of the building exists.
Yeah, yeah. So
That's really well said.
Thank you.
So Brad, let's get to the meat of the book here. So let's talk about how it starts and so we are talking about Rockwood, right? So what is Rockwood, and how did Rockwood CDC come about?
Yeah, well, for those who don't live in the Portland area, well, actually, it's for people who live in the Portland area, that still, after 11 years, the number one question I get is, where's Rockwood?
It do sound like some exotic place, though, don't it?
Well, it's technically in Gresham, but it's the part of Gresham that immediately abuts Portland City Line. Okay, And what I've learned in the years now that I'm starting to speak nationally is every American city has a Rockwood.
Yeah.
Every American city. And you know where you find it? You find it right on the other side of the city line, because the major cities are trying to drive out diversity. They're trying to drive out poverty. And they're not by solving it, by getting them to move.
See that?
That's a big part of that book. Yeah, I love it.
And then it comes back to that whole thing about that 22-ounce bottle that I keep talking about white society swallowing all the content of the history of this country and putting it in that 22-ounce bottle, and we go to them and we go, well, we will forgive you if you swallow this.
Are you talking about Old English?
Well, no, it sure ain't. No,
Wait,
it ain't
what,
Coke
22
45
ounce
either, you know. But no, I'm talking about how we have arrived to this place based on one or two options. The option is to acknowledge and accept, or to begin to not acknowledge and make invisible. And I think that when we got to those crossroads of when we talk about reparations and when we talk about all those types of things, we begin to see the writing on the wall and the truth about how urban renewal has always been BIPOC removal. You know?
Look, and that's, okay, so your listeners don't know this. I'm a white guy.
Yeah.
Talking about black issues. Wow.
That's okay, my brother,
Well,
because y'all created a lot of stuff. You should be able to talk about them. You know?
Hey, so I'm not here to solve anybody's problems, but I do have a front row seat.
Yeah, man.
At the families that are in Rockwood that are African American or African or Latino. I mean, we have 90 languages spoken at home in a 2 square mile area in Rockwood. 90.
Wow.
And I used to say, hey, that's the most diverse area in Oregon. But now that I'm traveling a lot more, I'll be at a conference with a lot of community leaders, and I'll just say, hey, show of hands, anybody have more than 90 languages in a 2 square mile area? I've never had anybody. So now I'm saying, well, I think it's one of the most diverse areas in the United States.
Wow.
So we got everybody, and they arrived from immigrant and refugee folks were resettled by the agencies because the apartments were cheap.
Yeah.
And the folks that were born and raised in Portland that were driven out intentionally by urban renewal, funded by HUD, back in the 70s and 80s, that's also where they were able to afford. Okay, so it's this giant melting pot. And I was raised there. I still live only 2 miles south of that district.
Man, exciting.
So when I started to get involved in the issue, I kind of... You're right. I'm from the tech industry, so I ran the numbers. I went to the Census Bureau and I pulled all the data and all those things, and I went, holy cow, this is the poorest community in Oregon. Does anybody know that? No. I went to the mayor. I said, hey, Mr. Mayor, what are we doing about this?
Which mayor?
Of Gresham.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Because at the time, wasn't it unclear, or it had been annexed?
It had already been annexed in,
right.
And the narrative out in Gresham, is everything was fine until TriMet put the max stop in. Which is not true. It was never fine.
You hear him, John?
But my response to that was, they put that in 1982. Okay, it's been 40 years. At what point do we start to deal with the new neighborhood? This isn't going to go away. This is us. And I found out no one's coming to help. So I really thought that honestly, all I had to do was shine a spotlight and the leaders would lead.
Were you surprised?
I was surprised. I started to bring in folks that I knew from a national level who had solved problems, and I was like, hey, here's a model. Why don't we just follow that model? Nothing. And I thought, well, I know they're rednecks because I grew up with them. That's my home.
Right.
I didn't realize they were racist.
Right.
But they really are.
Now, was that a core? Was the core of that demographic primarily Oregonians, or were they imports or exports, or what was your notion of that community? Was
The
that
Gresham
racist
community?
Yeah, racist community.
Oh,
yeah,
yeah.
Were
Yeah,
they
it's the
original
old.
Oregonians,
Yeah, it's the original,
Old
the
Guard?
old guard,
Yeah.
old guard, white Gresham.
Yeah, I think in the book you mentioned that at one point it was the largest sort of KKK.
Oh my God! As I started to do the detail,
residents.
yeah, and in post World War II, the Japanese internment.
Right.
A lot of Japanese farms out in the east side of Portland. It's covered in the paper, back Gresham Outlook and then the New York Times, that when the Japanese farmers started to be come home, their homes had been destroyed or confiscated. And these are American citizens. The mayor of Gresham held a rally to whip up anti-Japanese sentiment. This is after the war, and it was so bad the New York Times covered it as like, I think the KKK is alive again in Gresham, Oregon.
Yeah.
Now, I grew up there. Did I ever hear a word about that? No.
Yeah. Wow, it was stealth even to you, huh?
Total stealth.
Wow.
Total stealth. That's the Oregon way. Let's just not talk about it.
There was a writer named Jessica Milford, and I know, and I want you to continue this story, but it's just so interesting when you get to these intersections. And I remember because Jessica Milford was a civil rights activist from England, and she wrote a book called The Overt versus Covert Forms of Discriminatory Practice in the United States, and how the East was more overt and how the West was more covert.
Yes.
And how they approached it. So, but anyway, I didn't mean to interrupt you on that side of it, but it just really brought back that notion of how we still exist today, that it just seems like it's so liberal and so open, but there's a covert underbelly.
Well, I mean, I'm not here to talk about partisan politics. But
anytime you want to dance, big fella.
But I mean, there's a lot of dirt on both sides when it comes to poverty issues. Basically, neither side are serious.
Interesting.
Right. I love it in the book, and we can just jump around a little bit. So, you getting into this work really started with a knock on your door from a young Hispanic fellow named Ronaldo. And he had been beaten up.
I live in a nice place. It's a bit of a country estate feel south of Gresham.
Cool.
And I was going to go lift weights with my friend. It was about 5 a.m. Knock at the door, and nobody knocks on my door. Okay, right. I open it up, and there's this Latino kid, Ronaldo. He had been beaten up in a drug deal that had gone bad, and they had dumped him off in the rose bushes on the road.
Wow.
And he's cold. It's 5 a.m. He's beat up, and I go, "Oh my God, what?" I'll call the police. Oh, don't do that. Can you just help me figure out how to get home? Well, at that time, my buddy was pulling up because we were on our way to go lift, and I was like, "All right, we'll give you a ride." I'm not sure I would have given him a ride
if your buddy hadn't been along.
I'll be honest. You know, it was a little,
shady at best.
Yeah. Also, a pretty bold move, despite being in distress, for him to knock on your door. Like, 'cause
he was desperate.
Yeah.
But I was callous. I was just a rich white guy.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so we took him home and into Rockwood, into the heart of it, which I had not been into in years. But I had actually I had worked at the Fred Meyer before they tore it down, and that site is in visible range to his apartment. So I was like, wow, this place has changed a lot. And it really bothered me, actually. I was like, what the hell happened here, and why don't I know it, and why isn't anything being talked about or done?
Yeah, I think you're pointing out, like, you dropped him off in some apartments, and across the street were some strip clubs.
Oh, yeah. Human sexual trafficking, narcotic business. It was all around this kid. And it occurred to me he stood zero chance.
Wow.
Zero chance in life.
And so...
Well, it was compassionate of you to step into the gap, man, and do what you needed to do.
But that made the turn for you, though.
I don't know if it was compassion. I was more pissed off. Like, this is just a waste of human life. And these are solvable problems. Who's doing anything?
Yeah.
And the answer was nobody.
How old were you when you had that question about who's doing anything?
Well, this was 11 years ago.
Wow. So you were pretty much an elderly. You were an adult at that time,
Sure.
looking at that. Question,
Sure, I
right?
should have known.
Yeah.
I should have known better because I've always been kind of around poverty issues, like through church and things like that. But I really didn't have a clue, and so all of a sudden, I was pissed because the numbers were screaming out that there are people who are dying 10 to 15 years younger. They have terrible health outcomes. They have terrible educational outcomes. There's violence. There's displacement and distress. There's failed families. You go on and on and on. And apparently in Portland, that was fine, you know?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting how you really dissect the problem, Brad. And you talked about, I love some of the words that you got in there, was poverteers, right?
Poverteers.
So when you started to say, all I have to do is, raise awareness to this issue, right? They probably just need somebody like me to go to the city hall.
Pretty
maybe
much.
bring a plan and some good ideas, and off and running will go. But in the book, you really started saying this word povertier comes up throughout that, and basically explain to us the
What's the
povertier
definition of
system.
poverty?
Yeah.
Well, we coined that word for this book,
Right
and
on.
it's the combination of profiteers and poverty, people who make money off poverty. And the idea is that, poverty is a business. It's an industry.
Yeah.
The poor are not the beneficiaries of Poverty Inc. They are the raw materials.
Some of y'all might be getting uncomfortable.
Uh-huh.
It is there.
The beneficiaries of Poverty Inc. are the people who own the systems that keep them down. And those systems are designed to keep them down.
Now, when I
Wow.
read this in that book, Brad, I thought, boy, he must have some enemies.
Ha! Well, most of my enemies are illiterate,
Well, it's a good start.
so they don't know what I said in the book, but they're going to hear it now.
Yeah. They're the poverty pimps is what we used to call them.
Yeah, I mean, I think
You know.
one site you had a conversation with somebody, and you cited an example in the book about the Albina area.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And basically, that was it somebody who had been running for office?
No,
or some
he was a city councilor of Portland.
city councilor of Portland, and
He came to me one day because he said, I said, I was trying to be nice. Back when I was trying to be nice. Didn't get me anywhere.
Too many punches.
Didn't get me anywhere to be nice. But I said to him, well, what do you think about the unintended consequences of you moving everybody out of Albina? I thought that was a gracious way to say, what do you think about the disaster, And he snorted. He goes, there's no unintended consequences. We knew exactly what we were doing.
Ooh, did y'all hear that down low?
Did you all hear that? And I couldn't believe it. I honestly thought, I think this guy's lost it. They didn't intentionally do it. And a few years later, I was at a national conference, and there was a guy from HUD, Housing and Urban Development, that was sitting at my little table at the conference. And strangely enough, he was the HUD guy for Portland back in the 70s and 80s. And I said,
interesting.
I have a funny little story for you. Could this possibly be true? And he goes, of course it was true. It was an intentional, because Portland was given money if they solved poverty. And their way to solve poverty was to move poor people out. And one poor person moving off of the city limits means inside the city limits, the incomes went up one little bit.
Wow.
And that was as cynical as it could be. And they did it. And they got away with it. Until now.
Right, and
Yeah,
a lot of
until
cities got
now,
away
you're
with
right.
it. Yeah.
Because I'm sitting down there on the Hab myself, the I-5
Yeah.
Rose Quarter reconstruction on the lower, and then the lower Albina projects that are going on now.
Well, I'm really excited about it. Rukiah Adams is a friend of mine, and the work that the Albina Vision Trust and others are doing is truly exciting.
Yeah, we would agree with you. It's definitely exciting. It's definitely some soil shifting. We can talk about that another time, but I mean, the whole idea is that there's a lot of shift going on in the district. But I think that sometimes when we look at the future plans and shifts, and dreams and visions and all that kind of stuff. Sometimes we neglect to look at where some of the actual damage is occurring in pursuit of the vision.
Yeah.
So we have to be cognizant to work both angles at the same time.
It's a slow process.
Yeah. So, you guys, again, we're talking about the book, The Flourishing Community by author Brad Ketch. Brad helped start the Rockwood CDC. He was the director of it at one point.
We'll go co-founder with my wife, Lynn.
Yeah, with your wife, Lynn, who's in the medical field, right? Healthcare field, I should say.
Yeah. During these years, we were sort of preparing and hoping to get into working on poverty or community issues. She went up to Oregon Health Sciences University and got her certificate in public health.
Right on.
So that we could, and then she taught me everything.
Usually they do.
I was just a capitalist from the tech industry. She was like, there's this thing called social determinants of health. I'm like, what is that?
Those people with feelings.
I know. What are social determinants of health?
Yeah.
Ugh.
And the idea that she brought to the fold was that the zip code that you live in has way more impact on your health than any personal choices you make about your health. Wow.
Yeah.
And I was like, nah, I'm all about personal choice and responsibility.
Oh.
And she's like, well, I mean, you can do that all you want, but if you're living in an environment where there is no access to a clinic, where tobacco food desert, tobacco products are right on the counter next to the candy at the local convenience store, etc. You really don't stand a chance. And she's right. Yeah.
Oh man, some of the issues of this book had me so like I said, Brad, I felt like I was watching a movie at some point of it, right? And we're part of the Soul District Business Association too, so we're no strangers to having to roll up your sleeve and try to get the attention of the systems in place to raise some red flags, right? And just feeling like it's raining on deaf ears, right?
Right.
But I was talking with John about some of these things in our book, and John, he was watching me read it at times, right? And I was like, oh, this is I feel like music to my ears when you were talking about relief versus development versus betterment, so back to the poverty or kind of systems, and of course we always need relief, right?
Always.
People need aid, right? But it's not sustainable to just be giving relief. We really have to bring development and betterment to that. Can you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, we really do. As I started this, I didn't intend to start an organization. I actually found all the nonprofit leaders and said, well, how can I help? And what I realized, though, after 80 of those conversations, 80, that the vast majority of the work in Rockwood was relief services for our neighbors. Almost no work was development with our neighbors, right? And to the extent that you can focus on development with the neighborhood, you're going to add a lot more value. Now, does that mean there's anything wrong with relief? Not at all. I mean, if a kid needs a coat, the kid needs a coat. But there was a lot of that already. What nobody was doing was thinking about how do you transform an entire community,
right? Especially
when your city doesn't want it transformed. Probably if I had known that second part, I wouldn't have done it at all. I'll just be honest with you. It's been really, really hard, and it was really hard for years.
Yeah.
But there's this little thing called COVID.
Yeah, man.
When it hit, Oregon Health Authority said to us, we know where the epicenter of COVID deaths will be in Oregon because we know
the data,
it's called a social vulnerability index. And it says it's going to be right there. So we need somebody to quarterback the play for the entire area. And it's not the city of Gresham. So would you? And millions of dollars started to flow in.
Wow.
And we got 500,000 meals out the door. And, millions of dollars of personal protective equipment and thousands of vaccines. And now that that's all kind of come and gone, at least I hope to God COVID's kind of come and gone, but at least the major crisis, we were able to create a platform organization, if you will. And today We're continuing with community health, but we also have some very significant work in economic development and housing.
Right.
And now it's spreading to all of East Multnomah County.
Right, and that's called the Oregon Community Capital. That's the organization you started. Even before that, and we've got more time if you've got time.
I've
right?
got time. I'll talk all day.
Yeah, good, because prior to getting into that, I wanted to talk about you have a book, you have a chapter. So, and we can talk about, you describe this ecosystem of shalom, but in the book you also have a black chapter.
Yep.
Right. And so tell us about what that was like for you. You described sitting in you were doing these sort of Rockwood Speaks, and you were bringing people together. So speaking of, like, I don't want to do for the community, I want to do with the community. Right. So one of your first steps was something your friend called
he just
box to soup or soup to box,
what did
or
he call
something
that?
Like
I don't know. He just literally found African American people randomly in Rockwood and said, "Would you come to my house and we'll feed you dinner, and we just want to talk about life."
And who
Rockwood.
was this friend of yours?
His name is Scott McCracken, and he's just a guy. He was a volunteer on our staff at that time, and asked me to come. And there was one rule, and that was he could pose questions. He had 4 questions for the whole group. But the 2 white guys in the room were not going to talk. We were there to listen. And it was a powerful night. By the way, the first time I met a guy who's now important in my life, Vince Jones Dixon. Vince is today a city councilor in Gresham. Called into that because he's trying to fix this issue in concert with us and others. Vince has just announced last week he's going to run for Multnomah County Commission for District 4. I think at this point, basically running unopposed. I hope he wins. I hope he's our governor someday. Vince is the real thing.
He had a real personal story, right? Lost his brother.
Well, he did. He's had a lot of loss in his life, a lot of tragedy. And
in Rockwood.
Rockwood. I was actually in my one of our early offices. It was a spring day. The door was open. I heard a gunshot, and I found out later, we put 2 and 2 together, that was the loss of his brother's life.
Yeah.
Wow.
So that brought him he was over here in Northeast.
Yeah,
right?
he was up here. He was, he was minding his own business. And first time he ever stepped foot in Rockwood was to visit the scene where his brother was gunned down in a parking lot. And he came to us. We were doing a thing, we still do it, called Lunch and Learn.
Yeah.
Where we present what we think we know. We just so folks can make sense. Make sense of what's going on. He showed up with his adorable wife, and it began a journey for him.
Yeah.
And he decided that he could do something. In fact, he said, I really can't not do something. And today that's carried him this far, and I'm sure much farther in the future.
Yeah, I love it. And John, it's a chapter called The Black Chapter.
The Black Chapter.
And then he talks
that
about
mean a whole lot of things, but
it's where I tell the history, because I'm not that good of an author. I've never written a book before. I thought, let's just take all the African American related stuff in this book and put it all in one spot, because quite honestly, it's unbelievable.
Yeah.
How bad the dominant white culture has treated African Americans in Portland, historically and even to this very day.
Gotcha.
So can you describe something that came out of this? You call it, speaking of systems, shalom.
Shalom.
Yeah. So tell us
that's a Jewish terminology.
It is a Jewish term.
Right.
Yeah, I had not particularly known it.
Yeah.
I was just fishing around for, what are we trying to accomplish here? And this Jewish term is translated approximately, I don't speak Hebrew, but I've been told, peace, but not just peace or absence of conflict. It's more like a fullness, a wholeness. People are flourishing. They're thriving. They are, and there are a couple of key passages in Hebrew scriptures that describe this. There's a scene in Isaiah 61 that kind of lays it all out, and I was like, man, that's really compelling. And so I decided we'll call it, we'll adopt that term.
So you were in the book, I think you reference it, peace with self, peace with family, peace with community, peace with nature and environment, and peace with God.
All 5 dimensions. Yeah.
Right. And so those are the resources you tapped into in Rockwood, right? When you say let's improve not for, but with.
Yes.
So those are the
Yeah.
areas you started to develop, so
And
to
you-
speak.
And, I didn't invent that, those 5 elements.
Yeah.
In the world of development internationally, the major organizations, whether they're religious or not, they talk about those 5 elements.
Wow.
So a lot of what we're doing is actually, a little secret here, because we're not that creative. We're actually taking things that we do, that Americans do internationally, that work.
Huh.
We just don't do them here. So we're kind of repatriating some of these techniques for development into our own low-income communities, and it works here just as well.
So this Sunday, what was it? A Sunday afternoon, I was reading, getting through the chapters of your book, right? And there was some drama, right?
Yeah.
With the city of Gresham,
Yeah.
So you had fought to get rid of these strip clubs, fought to get rid of these check cashing places.
We got them
and
closed
stuff,
down.
and
Yeah, I
you
remember
had-
this part of the conversation, but I remember during the time y'all was doing it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right, and you were like, okay, and can we somehow, I guess, land bank, and you guys were, operating on films. You didn't have a lot of money in the organization. You had a
No.
lot of what you called social
capital.
right?
Social capital is way more important than money capital.
And social capital is
It's just the that you have relationships with important or powerful people, or just people who are a little further down the road. Maybe you have some knowledge, know-how of how to put together a better life for your kids. People who are financially poor, the sociologists tell us that they're also low in social capital. And someone like myself, as a white guy, his upper middle class, very high in social capital. And over time, if you're low in social capital, you will not probably develop wealth. Over time, if you're high in social capital, you probably will. And so the cool thing is you can help folks develop social capital. Mentoring programs, connections to businesses, connections to capital. In a lot of ways, all that we're doing is creating connections.
a relationship,
And
building
relationships. Yeah.
trust.
Between this totally disconnected community and the resources that they actually need.
CDC.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about it. That part that
Well-
was. Go ahead. I figured you was going
Okay,
somewhere.
right.
You got-
So the reason I brought this up, because I'm reading this book, right? And so I'm not quite sure in your timeline where you worked for this NGO kind of thing.
Yeah.
But so you got into, got rid of some of the, distressing businesses that
Yes.
were leading to some of the, really
The blight.
the blight. Thanks, John.
Yeah.
And hoping to start this kind of sunshine. Your vision was a school, sunshine development, where all these organizations that were doing really good work, where your social assets could come together and feed in and out. And you had worked with this city development from Gresham, but the mayor, and there was some drama there.
There was
right?
drama.
And what did you call it? The "Let's Part as Friends" chapter.
Well, that's what happened. Is I thought we were all on the same team.
Yeah.
But as it turns out, I was kicking into some hornets' nests I didn't know about.
Yeah.
And I was starting to threaten the Poverteers, including people on the city council and the mayor. And one day, phone call, can you come to City Hall and meet with us? Which was a regular occurrence. So, we go walking in there and, hi, how's everybody? But it's not a hi, how's everybody? There's the city attorney, and there was, this array of people. And the assistant city manager leads, the very first thing out of her mouth was, let's part friends.
Wow.
Thought, oh no, this is
Wow.
going to be
Not a good day.
this is going to be a mess.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
it was a mess. They thought that we would just roll over because we were so vulnerable. We didn't have any money.
Right.
And they were wrong. Although when my wife and I walked away that Friday afternoon, they had figured out some way that we owed them some money on the lease for the Sunrise Center, and it was partly right and it was partly wrong, and it was a little bit confusing. We were working it was about property taxes, and we were trying to work it out with Multnomah County. We thought we were in good shape. We were trying to make it all work, but all of a sudden it was the thing that they could force the termination of our lease on.
Right.
Okay.
Right. They
And
found an angle.
They found an angle.
Yeah.
Yeah,
You know,
because it wasn't a ton of. It was 17,000. Well,
It was-
maybe
yeah.
34.
It was
'cause they tried to double
$34,000
it somehow.
Well, they did,
Right.
But at that time for us, $34,000 was. It
Yeah.
could be 34
oh, yeah,
million.
Yeah.
You know,
And
Yeah,
you had to
when you
come
ain't
up
got
with
no
it
money.
in 2 weeks.
no,
Or
by
se-
Monday morning.
Okay, it's insane.
But yeah, they know how to put you in
Right.
the pressure situation. They had to
Right.
the pressure hole.
They did, and they thought done and done.
Yeah.
But over the weekend, we raised half of it. And then over the weekend, I do not know how this happened. Somebody at Multnomah County Property Tax wrote off the other half.
Wow.
God's
And
fine.
I did not ask them to.
And you said something about those 5 things that you were going around the world introducing people to, and one of those things was a God word, didn't you?
Oh,
Yeah.
Yeah,
Sure.
yeah,
Yeah.
that big old word, a good
Yeah.
orderly direction.
Yeah.
I've never heard that.
Yeah,
know,
in the
yeah, you know.
but this is, I think, maybe even though it was your toughest time, Brad. I'm sorry, it was almost one of my favorite parts of the book because it was so picturesque. In the book, you described that weekend, you walking out of your house, going and out to your yard, and kind of leaning against, sitting on something, and just be like, you know. I guess it was your decision where you were not going to give up.
Yeah.
And then you go back to a story that just made me cry, right? And that's the Joshua,
Yeah, Joshua.
right, in the Philippines.
Yeah.
Can you just speak to that a little bit? Because it was just so hard for. I literally was crying, and I think I was around John when I was reading that chapter, and he's like, "What is wrong with you?"
Yeah, well, that's a reoccurring
Oh, yeah.
situation.
That's right with me.
We'll keep on going. Every one of these books got a different kind of deliverable, right? You know?
Well, so in the timeline, after my tech career tanked, and we decided to kind of revector our lives to poverty issues. For the first 4 years, nothing happened. I didn't work for 4 years.
Wow.
We're just living on savings because I had done well in the tech world. But it was just I guess it was just something I had to go through for it to settle in deep what was going to be the next phase of our life. And the first thing that happened is I got a phone call from a guy in Hong Kong I had never heard of or met before. He was the chair of the board of a non-governmental organization, an NGO, that was working with 100,000 ultra-poor Filipinos every year.
Ultra-poor, right?
$2 a day and below.
It sounds like Jamaica.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
And they wanted an American-style CEO to kind of come in and, I don't know, fire some people and do American CEO things. And
The dirty work for me.
but it was an amazing job that I had because a typical day I would be with a cabinet minister in Manila, and in the morning and in the afternoon I'd be in a ultra-poor fishing village somewhere working with people who are $2 a day and below. And I learned so much about poverty. It's actually why I had fresh eyes when I came back to East County, because poverty isn't about what's in your wallet. It's about what's in your head and your heart.
Oh, did y'all hear that? Do I need to repeat that again?
Yeah.
Poverty is not about what's in your wallet. It's what poverty is about, what's in your head.
And your heart.
Nah,
and that is
yeah,
the
y'all
same.
Step back to po folk. Y'all keep thinking you po, but you ain't po. Only po you is in your head.
That's the same the world over. And people in Rockwood probably bear more resemblance to the poor of a fishing village in the Philippines than they do to mainstream Portland society. And that's I'm not condemning them or complaining about them. I'm just saying that's what I saw when I came back. I was like, oh, this is totally different than I thought.
Yeah.
Now, my organization was making a big difference. And I thought, all right, we'll just take that playbook and we'll start to do it in Rockwood.
Yeah.
But you asked me about Joshua. During that time, there was a child. Just in the interest, I don't want to go through it.
I
But
know.
but I told it, he was basically dying of something people don't die of in the U.S. He was dying of neglect. There were resources, but they were just letting this child die for a variety of reasons. That's not a very Filipino thing. They're a super loving culture, but there was some special circumstances. I'm sure that child is dead now. But I called my mentor. Here in the next day, I was devastated. I held him. I wanted to physically cradle this child because I'm a father, and I couldn't not do it. And I called my mentor here, and he says, well, what you encountered was evil. Capital E, evil. And you have to understand a story like that through that lens. So that's why I inserted it in the story with Gresham, because that's the only way to understand the city of Gresham trying to close down the only organization that is trying to make a difference for 1/3 of its people.
Yeah. Well, you came out of that, and you guys, you got to read the book in order to and see. It's getting to me again. This is a really good part. You came out of that, and the book really chronological, some great stuff. If you're a nonprofit organization, if you're anybody who cares about getting involved in community development or solving the poverty, which is interesting. You point out that, at some point the world's poverty was 37%, and it's going down, right? It's going down.
Ultra poverty is.
But, people always think it's happening outside their communities, right? You put a quote in there about Mother Teresa. People wanted to go to Calcutta and help her, and she would be sending people home and go find your own Calcutta. I think you say in the book.
Isn't that a badass thing for her to say?
Yeah.
People showed up with suitcases of cash, and they're like, we want to help you. And she would say, go home, find your own community.
Because they're there, right? Every city has one. Every state,
exactly.
It's in your backyard. Look for it and fix it.
Yeah,
right?
Exactly. Make it. At some point, Lynn and I just decided to make the problems of this community our problem.
Well, man, that's noble, y'all. And I with the 5 things that you said you were bringing around the world, I can only see where that compassion and empathy would be a part of all of that. I mean, it would be a necessary element to have, I would think.
You would have to.
But what I began to see was, even as someone who works in these political environments and tried to develop companies and all those kinds of things in communities, this whole reality around this CDC. And, and as a community development organization, or even as an organization that works with the community, such the necessary elements to be successful in these kinds of endeavors is to have some kind of understanding on how to do banking and all of that kind of stuff, man. And, and I've struggled. I used to always ask my staff, we need to become a bank. Is this a way to become a bank around here? We need to be able to handle our own funds. And then your book talks about, and I kept thinking it was an act of Congress to go establish a CDC.
No,
you always have to align yourself with a pre-existing CDC. How does that all work? And in your book, you go, hey, that's easy. Tell us about that.
I'm gonna use your question and take it in a slightly different angle. I think sometimes with these, Oregon has 11,000 nonprofits, and probably 5,000 are alive, 6,000 are maybe lapsed or whatever. But that's what the database for the state. And they frequently they might start as a closed closet, or they might start as a preschool or something. And they know after a while that they have to be broader, because this child that they're working with is in an environment that isn't working. And so they start to say, well, how do we become a CDC? How do we step it up? How do we and where do you learn that? I don't know.
Yeah, we sure it's not information that's readily available to
well,
you out there.
We're going to fix that. So we've got
right.
We've got a conference coming up.
Well, right on, Brad.
May 28th, May 29th here in Portland at the Convention Center, Hyatt Regency.
Wow.
Called Flourishing Oregon. Community Leaders at the Root of Change.
Man.
And we're hoping for 500, 600, 700 people. We've got 28 breakout sessions. If you want to learn about how to get a new market tax credit, we got a guy there for you. If you want to learn about how to get better aligned with your local health clinic and get them better connected to the neighbors in the community who aren't accessing it, we're your stop. If you want to learn how to run your nonprofit better, we have 7 breakouts. And I'm really excited. Just last week, we got agreement from the Nonprofit Association of Oregon, NAO. They're going to run those 7 breakouts. So they're going to teach everybody from idea all the way to the end. And it's 2 days, and we'd love for your listeners to come. It's really for everybody.
Oh, really? For everybody? Okay, yeah. And it's called our Flourishing Oregon Conference.
Yes.
That's May 28th and 29th at the Hyatt Regency downtown Portland.
FlourishingOregon.com.
We've been speaking with Brad Ketch. He's the author of the Flourishing
Yes, sir,
Community.
Brad Ketch, y'all. Man, oh man, this has been really informative, really exciting. Brad, we do appreciate you coming on the show today, man, and giving us a little bit of your insight, man. And your book was just tremendous, man. I'm really surprised that I hadn't gotten an opportunity to see it before this last couple months. And
Well, it's new, right? I mean, you
Yeah,
wrote
actually-
it in 2023?
Well, actually, last week is 1 year.
Oh,
And
yeah,
there,
that's
and
what
there
I'm
hasn't.
saying.
Yeah, so
I've
it's
heard some reference to it over the year, that last year, and I'm glad that you were able to bring it to light, to the table. And
where can you get the book, Brad?
anywhere. It's on
Amazon
Yeah, it was
and-
released by Simon & Schuster, so it's on Amazon or Pals or anywhere. And anybody who's local, if you want to connect with us, you are welcome to do so. Just go to our website, and there's some information there.
Brad, give us a little bit of insight on where you're at today, man. What's next for you? And what did we miss asking you? You seem like a very insightful fellow, and I'm sure you're tracking. And this whole notion that people ask you questions about your book, and I'm sure in your mind you're going, well, but they should have asked me this. Well, what should we have asked you, Brad, about some things that you might want to be reflective of right now to our listeners that maybe perhaps we didn't cover here as we exit?
Well, that's a good question, but I do feel like we kind of hit we hit a lot of it. I guess I would just leave this with your listeners, that they really can do it. They really can make a difference in their community. And starting with conversations with their neighbors and then asking a question, what could we accomplish together if we were to we get organized a little bit, maybe get a little bit of cash in? What do we envision? And then let's take a first step or two. It is so powerful. It really is powerful. That's all we did to get started. And today we're a $9 million organization with 50 employees and growing rapidly. But at its core, almost every single day, there is a formal conversation going on with our neighbors in Rockwood.
Right on, man.
So that we're always tethered to the voice of the community. The voice of the community.
Yeah, that's y'all hear that? The voice of the community. Welcome to Black Beat Podcast, y'all, where we take an unapologetic approach to the issues that affect our black community. And this one, y'all, this book is something y'all to get your hands on. And then remember, there's some things coming up here. We're going to go to our website. We're going to post for you this Flourishing Oregon conference that they're getting ready to put on. And, Brad, this has been real insightful for me. And I do appreciate you coming on the show again, man, and giving us some insight on some of these things. You hear?
Well, it's been my pleasure. Thank you so much, John.
Respect. And we appreciate you, Fawn Aberson, for showing up. And we don't apologize about the emotional aspects that you have from these books, but keep up the good work with them. And we appreciate y'all. We out, y'all.